I'm Megan. I'm a pastor's kid, and this is my story. I've been a pastor's kid since the time I was about 10 years old, and I'd be lying if I said it was an easy journey. My dad has been through a couple different churches, and they've all had their ups and their downs. More downs than not, I would say. It was a lot of shock to me as a child, growing up with an idealistic idea of the world and of the church. I didn't take into account the sin nature of people being a pastor's kid. And it was difficult at times to watch some of the things that went on behind the scenes, because being a pastor's child, I got to see a lot of the things that even a lot of adults don't see in the church. And I had a hard time processing a lot of it. Most of the time there was support lacking. My parents seemed that they were just on their own. It affected my family life to see the lack of support in the church in such a way that my dad would come home from work, and I could tell by the look on his face that he had had a rough day. It wasn't very encouraging, and that was hard to see as a middle schooler at this point. I was about 13 or 14, and it was hard to see my dad discouraged and down, and that happened quite often. And even in the past few years, my high school years, I would see the same thing where I kept thinking that it would get better and the support would be there and God would come through. And I remember struggling with the thought that, why is God not allowing my dad to be encouraged just by the congregation or the board? And that was something I really struggled with. I didn't understand how God could allow that to happen. And it wasn't until I was probably 16 or 17 that I finally began to grasp it wasn't God doing those things. It was the people. It was the people turning away from what God wanted. And that affected my dad, that affected my mom, and that affected my whole family in such a way where discouragement became a very common just aura around the house. And then something wonderful happened a few years into being in Florida, and Care for Pastors came alongside of us, and they provided that support that was lacking in the church. They supported the care and the love for my parents that they so desperately needed. They had been beaten down to the point where I was afraid that they might give up faith, and they never did. They always stayed focused on what God wanted, and Care for Pastors only strengthened that faith. It strengthened them. It shined through in my family life, where my dad would come home from work and it would be a discouraging day, but he didn't have that look of discouragement on his face. He had a more positive look at the church because he was being uplifted. Care for Pastors was helping to heal him. And in turn, that healed the church. Started to see some differences there. A little more light was shed upon the church and the congregation. Things at home were better. They were never bad, but they were better because work wasn't affecting our home life as much, because we had that support and that love. They had someone to turn to when they didn't know what to do. They had a group of people that were praying for them and praying for us. And as a pastor's kid, I had people praying for me as well. And that has been so huge, because as a pastor's kid, you go through your doubts and you start to wonder, why is this happening? And Care for Pastors gave me the opportunity to learn that it's not God that's doing this. It's people, and it's normal, and it's going to be in any church. And that's not to say that they're all terrible people. They're just human. And we all need support and encouragement. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily view that the pastor needs the same kind of love and support that they do, because he's their leader. And they do look up to him. And just recently, I received a pamphlet in the mail from Care for Pastors, and I had a background about Care for Pastors. I had heard my parents talk about it for many years at this point, and I received a pamphlet in the mail about pastors' kids and supporting them, and something just clicked with me. And I realized how important the pastors' kids are in the entire picture of caring for pastors. And I read the short story about a little girl who her daddy was a pastor, and it really touched me and encouraged me to reach out to other families because I wanted them to feel the same kind of support that I felt, and maybe even the support that I lacked when I was younger back in Texas before we had Care for Pastors. It's really been neat to make that transition from me being so starving and so hungry for the support to the point where now I can give back and I can offer my support and my love. And that's really a great place to reach when you're finally built up to the point where I feel like God has put me at this point. He has brought Care for Pastors alongside of us, and that strengthens families, it strengthens even the kids, and then we're able to give back. And now I am sponsoring a pastoral family with the Pastors Allies program, and that gives me the opportunity to give back the kind of support and love that I felt myself and the support that I got myself. If you're a pastor, you're going to need the support that my family needed. And so I encourage you to join the Care for Pastors program. It'll make a world of difference to your family and to you. If you're a pastor's kid, learn to keep your faith and learn to support your parents. So I invite you to join me in sponsoring another pastoral family.